T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kush's Corner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight is an absolute banger of an episode, without a doubt the most star-studded lineup that I've had on the show here yet. As you guys can see on your screen, we have Patrick Holmes, Kyle Vargas, Marc Bailey, and Marshall Mendez in the building tonight with the topic of rodent breeding for this episode, how you can do it on a small scale for your collection, really at all different scales. But the main purpose of this episode is to encourage people to breed rodents for their reptiles. But before we get into all of that, as always, USARK. So USARK is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, to live this lifestyle we all enjoy so much. If you are not already a member of USARK, please check out usark.org for all the information you need to know, updates on new legislation introduced at both local and national levels. And any amount of support for USARK is much appreciated. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and the more people that are behind the cause, the better. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for checking us out tonight. Thank you to everyone who is already in the live chats throughout the episode. If you guys have questions, this is definitely one that I hope we have a decent amount of audience interaction on. This is a topic that is not discussed nearly enough, and this is an episode that I've been wanting to put together for a while. Emilio was going to be joining us tonight, but unfortunately he got sick. But fortunately, in his place, last-minute additions of both Kyle and Marshall. Very much appreciative of both of them being able to be so flexible at the last minute. If you are here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. A new podcast drops every single day of the week from some of the best hosts in the game, talking about a wide variety of different reptile-related topics. So if you're looking for your reptile-related audio content, you have come to the right place. We are on the streaming services as well, be that Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. A follow and a 5-star review would be most appreciated on those platforms. And without further ado, let's get this first guest on the show here. Yo, Patrick, what's going on, man?
What's up, dude?
Dude, I'm fucking stoked for this episode.
Yeah.
How's stuff going over there in good old north central Texas?
It's I think I'm just North Texas.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough.
it's definitely going. I'm still trying to breathe after Tinley.
Yeah.
You know, I was gone for a few days, and even with Zach coming over to help out with stuff over here while I was gone, it's, you know, I'm still playing catch up, and it's busy season at work, and so I am as per usual underslept and overwhelmed. So
well, yeah. How was Tinley?
Fucking fantastic.
Nice.
You know, that was only my second one. I had an absolute blast last time. I had a blast this time. It was a little less overwhelming.
Okay.
But there was fewer people there that I knew this time versus last time. So that's why it was a little overwhelming to me the first time, because there were just so many people there that I knew and so many that I had never met before. And I was just trying to talk to everybody.
Yeah, sure.
But this time the crowds actually got super busy in there both days, and the colubrid representation was badass. There were so many awesome colubrids there, man.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, it was good stuff, man. I had a really, you know, I don't like, it was super cool to see a lot of cool animals. You know, I go to these things for the people and the conversations and the hangout. float around and be the social butterfly that I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, we're gonna bring one of the first other guests on. We're gonna bring on Mr. Marshall Mendez. So for everyone out there, what should they know about Marshall before we get into this episode, Patrick?
So, people sometimes call me, say I'm certain things in the chondro game. Some people call me an OG because I've been doing it for a long time. Marshall was like, when I first started getting serious about, like really serious about breeding chondros, 2008, 2009, Marshall was already entrenched in the community and producing absolutely insane stuff and had an absolutely insane collection. And he still is to this day. He's the albino guy.
Yes, he is.
Keeping that bloodline alive one at a time. And Marshall is just a super, super cool dude and has an outrageous arboreal collection, emeralds and Amazons and chondros, man, all day.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, without further ado, let's bring him onto the show. What's going on,
Good
Marshall?
evening. How are y'all? Man, it's tough to, that's a tough build-up to live up to there, Patrick.
I'm just speaking the truth, man.
I appreciate it. That's nice of you. So how's it going tonight?
Dude, it's going well. I really appreciate you taking this on at the very last second. Yeah. I feel
go ahead.
No, I just said I threw that Hail Mary at the last second, and I was like, "Let's see if this works." And I was like, "All right, let's go."
Yeah. I went deep into the wormhole of when I built my rat shed 3 or 4. It gets this shit. It's been like 4 years ago now. Yeah. Of every YouTube video I could find, so I don't think I've ever talked about it really in depth on a podcast. So I was like, hell yeah, that sounds like fun.
Well, we will definitely do it tonight.
Although they're not fun, the rodents are fucking pretty terrible. But getting everything set up to be as easy as possible is fun.
Yeah, well, the point of the episode is to encourage people to do it. So we're off to a great start.
But, I mean, come on, dude. That's like telling us we're gonna do an episode to encourage people to breed chondros. Me and Marshall are not the motherfuckers to ask that question.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. All right, so Patrick, we're going to bring Kyle on next. It's been a while since Kyle's been a guest on the channel here. For those who haven't heard Kyle talk yet, what should they know about Mr. Kyle Vargas?
Man, Kyle, well, his Instagram handle, the Clob King, says it all. In addition to having an absolutely unreal collection of rock rattlesnakes and other terrestrial vipers, and some colubrids too, his collection is just ridiculous. And as far as I'm aware, and definitely as far as I'm concerned, like the pinnacle rock rattlesnake collection on the planet.
Yeah, without a doubt.
But in addition to that, and most importantly, I cannot think of another human that I know that has spent more time in the habitat of the species that he keeps than Kyle. I really can't think of anybody else. And so his dedication to knowing where his animals are from and what they need, and just like to be so laser focused on something like that is just unbelievable, man. And also additionally, a really, really good friend. Kyle's just a badass dude.
Yeah. Well, after another glowing intro, let's bring Kyle onto the show. What's going on, dude?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
Doing pretty well. Thank you for joining us tonight, man. How's stuff going over there? How are the snakes waking up?
Good, man. Everybody's pretty much up now. Most everybody in the collection's fed. But still early, so there's not too much work in here yet. A couple more weeks and we really start picking things up.
Yeah, fair enough. Have you gotten those first feedings in yet?
For most everything, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Hell yeah. Yeah, I mean,
with some specially bred mice.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The reason why we're here tonight. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've talked on the show a handful of times, a little bit about how I do my mice, and I got to give full credit to Kyle on that. He's the one who put me on game with the naturalistic rodent diet. So all credit goes to him as far as that goes, and I'm excited to get into it a little bit later on when we hit the topic of feeding with the rodents. But yeah, man, the last, but certainly not least guy we got to bring onto the show is one of the OGs of rodent breeding, and that is Mr. Marc Bailey. He's done it on all different scales, large professional scale. Now he's doing it to the scale of feeding his own collection of some of the absolute best ball pythons in the game. And this is somebody who is from the standpoint of breeding rodents on a larger scale. I've learned. I can't say there's one person who's taught me more than Marc Bailey has. So without further ado, here is Mr. Marc Bailey. What's going on, Marc?
Oh, just doing the thing.
Yep. Is the weather getting any better up there yet, or are you still pretty freezing?
Yeah, it's been much better.
Okay.
We were, I think, God, maybe 3 weeks ago, we were 20 below.
Oh,
oh no.
Tell me. And Marshall, you know where I'm from, so it's
yeah.
It stayed 20 below for we got up to 0 and then dipped back down to 15 below, 20 below, like 5 days in a row. And then then a week later it does the same thing again. So a couple years ago I froze the water pipe going out from the house to the building where the rodents are. And that had never happened before. I've been here 25 years, and it was during a stretch of like 30 below and like massive winds and all that, and it really sucked because it took, I think that froze in like February, and it wasn't until May until it thawed out. So I had to figure out how to do the gravity water system, carrying water out from the house.
Yeah. So you're just like taking buckets out to the rat room, filling.
Yeah, luckily I didn't have near the number of rats that I used to in mine.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I think that's part of the reason why it froze, because the water wasn't moving as fast.
Okay.
We had, I had water
sense.
flowing out to 3 buildings off of that pipe.
And, so was that not an issue you experienced back when you were at a large scale?
No, never had it happen.
Yeah. So, gosh.
And it looks like we're good now, but I'm gonna have to figure something out. I might have to, because I laid that pipe, like I said, 27 years ago now, when I bought this house, and I put it 6 feet deep.
Damn, you'd think that would be enough.
Yeah. Well, it tells you how deep like the bull snakes and the hognose snakes have to get to hibernate here.
Yeah, for sure. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, luckily everything's all good for you now. But man, that's scary. I mean, things can get scary with snakes, with weather, but with rodents, I mean, the slightest variance in what you have going on with them, and it could be a total catastrophe. And people, I don't think, realize that who've never really experienced rodents on a large scale.
I used to tell people if I had a problem with my rodents, it would take me maybe a couple years to get back up to speed. If they went down. So, I mean, I've had production going for 35 years straight now.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, so been pretty lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to get into the first topic for the episode, really a pretty simple one. But Marc, I'll start with you. So I guess why did you get into rodents to begin with? What were the reasons at the time, and kind of when you did, what was your supply already of rodents that you were using?
I had just moved to Minnesota from Louisiana. When I was younger, I always had snakes, and I would just go to the pet shop and get some mice, or I'd catch toads or lizards or whatever I needed. And then when I moved up to Minnesota, the first snakes I picked up, in 1990 here were some corn snakes, and they just ate mice. So I started raising some mice to feed those.
Okay.
And then met a couple of people that they asked me if I had, that had snakes too. And they asked me if I had some extra mice, and it just all kind of started right there. Realized I could maybe make a business out of it, and started growing mice and snakes. Started out with colubrids and boas.
So from the time you started breeding mice until you had any amount of a business model revolving around it, how long was that period?
How long?
Like from when you started breeding, until you started selling and actually being profitable.
Within a few months, because I had.
Oh wow! Okay.
I had actually joined like the Herpetological Society, and I met a bunch of other people that were into snakes there, and it's kind of the same deal it is now. Everybody's always looking for mice and rats.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking for them cheap, because the pet stores used to charge twice of what you can get them wholesale.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was cheaper to feed my stuff, a steady supply. It just made sense.
Yeah.
I never anticipated, I never set out to turn that into a business. It just kind of became that. So, yeah.
Yeah, very natural progression. All right. Well, so Kyle, I'll throw this one to you next. When did you start breeding rodents and why? And then before that, what were you using?
I guess I didn't start breeding rodents till probably about 8 years ago now.
Okay.
Before that, I was just using, pet shop mice. A friend of mine owns a pet shop here, and I would get mice from him often. And if not him, then I had another friend who I would buy from, who lives out of town. But definitely hard to say I'd ever go back to feeding anything but my own mice that I produce here.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one thing that you can't know until you experience it yourself as to just how much better it is to do it this way. I mean, so Kyle, speak to that a little bit. Like, what are some of the aspects of your own rodents compared to the ones you were getting, made you want to stick with that?
So, man, I don't know where to start.
No, it's a loaded question.
I don't know. I just, I like to give my stuff a natural diet. When I keep my snakes as natural as I possibly can. That means rocks, grasses, leaf litter, things like that from their respective mountain ranges, sometimes from within, feet of where they were found.
Right.
So I try to do the same with the mice. And I have since the time I've been breeding them, feeding them as natural a diet as I possibly can. That includes insects and various vegetables and roots and things like that. And it's made an immeasurable difference in my collection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to get into that much heavier later in the conversation. But yeah, that's an aspect that I think most people aren't even aware that anyone does to begin with. So yeah, to have you on here talking about that's going to be huge tonight. So Marshall, I'll throw that same intro question out to you. What got you started with the rodents?
I started with breeding them back in probably 2010 or 11, which before that point it was just frozen, and I used to buy them from the mouse factory back in the day. They always had the best ones, it seemed like, and but anyway, it got to the point once I started getting heavier into the ball pythons, which was I think I got my first one in maybe like 07 or 08, and then made it about 5 years of doing them without breeding my own rodents, and then finally it was just a convenience thing. Like I got tired of being kind of beholden to the rat lady who would only was supposed to come at Tuesday at 2, but there was always something. Her car broke down, her this or that. And, it's like, well, I can't meet you at 3. Like I got shit that I'm doing at 3. So we were, so anyway, snakes just didn't get fed that week. And then I, as started getting more snakes and, it started to become more of a business. It really wasn't about the money, although I realize now how much money it saves if I would have to, you know, versus buying them. But I got into it just mainly for the convenience. You know, I bitch a lot about how much work it is and how.
But at the end of the day, I'm doing it for a reason, you know, like, there's definitely benefits to it. You just have to know what you're getting yourself into, you know, but there's benefits for sure.
Yeah, that's a really annoying part that you mentioned of, you know, a lot of feeder providers, not all, but a lot of them, you know, they'll have inconsistencies in supplies and, oh, yeah, I'll ship next week, or I can't get them to you now, or you can't get them from me now. So having the convenience of being able to, you know, walk out to your shed or walk into your rodent room and grab something is really, you know, it's something that you can get used to fast, and then you'd hate having to have something different be your, you know, your normal routine. But oh shit, Patrick, how about you now? How about, you know, what do you what's your answer to the original starter question here?
Sure. And there's one thing I have to mention before I get into that. This is weird to me, like sitting here looking at all these faces, and every single one of us, we are like top of our game in our like respective you know, focuses.
Yeah.
And it's fucking weird that we're all just sitting around talking about rats.
It's the reason why, Patrick, and we all know this. It's probably, well, I mean, it's probably the most important part of what we do. You know, like the Clobber Eye King over here, you know, with the natural diet. I mean, I'm all for that, and you can't buy that anywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, I've done similar things years ago with mice. But yeah, it's a necessity for people like us that have a large enough collection and depend on mice and rats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this comment right here says it all from Kenny. You know, top of the game involves feeding of the collection. I mean, that's the base, that's the ground floor of everything we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, if the feeding isn't right, nothing else will follow. So, you know, as much as this might not be the most glamorous conversation in the world, it can't get much more important than feeding your animals. And, you know, I think the success of everyone who's on this podcast right now is indicative of that being the case. So to get into it, the first thing I want to ask you guys, I'll start with you, Mark, again. What is the current scale you are running as far as your rodent operation? And then on a weekly basis, how much time do you have to put into maintaining it?
Maybe I could answer that kind of in reverse order, but that's the first thing I do every morning.
Okay.
It's, you know, 150 feet from the house. So I just head out there and spend a little bit of time out there. Some days I do nothing. Some days I dust. I don't have much. We've got, I can tell you how many racks. 3 racks for mice. These are Freedom Breeder style racks, standard.
Like 50 tub slots?
50 tub slots, and then one grow up deal that's 2 across. Nice big tubs.
The 2020 series?
I don't know, but I think you've seen because I sold Forrest a couple of those.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The 2020 series tub.
Yeah. And then I think for rats, it's like I actually use mouse racks for pregnant females, and I've got 3 of those going, and probably 3, I call them CB70 tub size.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 racks of those going for rats. And the funny thing is, when you look at my stuff, I don't have anything on like the bottom 2 or 3 rows, and nothing on the top rows. It's from you know, 2 or 3 torn rotator cuffs in the last decade, and I'm just getting old. But I don't feel like bending down to the floor now. So
sure.
It's a little more spread out. I'm not raising rodents commercially. It's mostly just for mine. I still kick out about, I think last year we did 45 grand in rodents, just the surplus. And I got a couple of customers that have been long-term wildlife rehabbers. So I take care of those guys.
Yeah. Anyone who's listening right now should replay that sentence in your head. Just 45 grand on surplus from what he just described, which is probably the largest scale of all of us who are on the show right now, but is essentially nothing in the grand scheme of what rodent production can be. So, not only can this be something that supports your collection, you can also support yourself monetarily as well. And if there's, especially like on a local level, there's no such thing as too many rodents. That's for damn sure. So like what's the square footage of that room you're running, Mark?
The one building now, I had 3 buildings, and the one building now is about 1,100 square feet. There's plenty of extra room in there. I got a couple tents in there. I do some other stuff in there. It's just there.
Sure.
I've downsized quite a bit in the last 15 years. So, which has been nice.
Yeah. So like on a weekly standpoint, like how many hours would you say you're actively working on those rodents?
Okay. So and then Jill does, she does the mice.
Okay. Right.
I
Yeah.
do rats. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she probably spends maybe 3-4 hours a week out there. And work wise, I probably spend maybe 4 or 5 hours a week.
Yeah.
Not that much. I might put in an hour of work a morning,
Okay.
and I kind of spread it out. If I'm going out of town, I'll put in 2 or 3 hours of work, and I can go out of town for 4 days. So it's a heck of a lot better than it used to be. And the thing with I'm pretty good at it. So I don't cut corners. The rodents are like, they're immaculate. They're, you go in there, you could, and during the day, you don't hear any coughing, sneezing, no fighting, nothing. It's like quiet.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. I've always liked the mice and the rats. I've taken it as a challenge to make it the most productive and the easiest it can possibly be and all that. So.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So, Marshall, how about you next for that question? What's your scale and how much time does it take you?
My scale is I have a 120 square foot building that was basically built for doing rodents.
Okay.
And I have about 60. I run about 60 mice. This is adult females. So 60 adult female mice and about 75 adult female rats at any one time. That's when like I'm trying to feed the most amount of snakes. So that's that's baby season basically, where I'm going through a lot of pups and rat crawlers. But and that takes me about so my son and I clean every other weekend, and it takes us about 2 hours to clean it. Top to bottom. That's like bring the racks out, dust them off with a paintbrush. Like I'm pretty anal about it. Like, like Mark was saying, dust and, shit gets real dusty with pine pellets and the sawdust, or pine shavings. So, keep a paintbrush in there. And that's one of the things that, that's how we do it. So my son is a huge help. Without him, it used to take me about 5 hours by myself to do it. Every other week. And then intermittently during the week, filling up water buckets. Although, I had the building plumbed for water, but I haven't, I just use it as just having a water source out there for cleaning and whatnot. I still do the buckets just because, I don't know, the floods just seem, I've had some pretty minor ones and I don't want a major one. So I just do the buckets. It takes me like, 5 minutes twice a week to fill all 4 of them up. And then I run basically 3 racks. One of them has got 3 mouse levels, 3 rat levels. And then I have one kind of a bigger rack that is, I keep 1.6 in at any given time. And then I have another of rats. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have like another raise up, or birthing tubs for the rats. And then, some, I'll take two or 3 moms with their babies and put them in a little bit bigger tub and, till they're wean size. And then I've got one of those big, the 4-foot tub freedom breeder style racks to grow out. And man, I built way more racks than what I need. I wasn't sure, I wasn't sure when I was kind of figuring out what I needed, how many I needed. And I got more. So there was a point when I was just trying to figure it out. I was producing just in that small setup, like an extra 200 smalls a week. But I'm trying to like skinny it back to where I don't want to produce any extra, and I'm trying to produce just enough. I'm in like a residential kind of area, so the smell is an issue. So I've got to keep everything like, super clean. And yeah, it's so yeah, that's it. And then I do have some surplus, but I got one guy that comes and takes all of it just to make it easy. Yeah,
that's nice. I mean, I bet that surplus probably covers your feed bill.
It covers, it just depends, man. Like the first year, it was profitable. Like I made money even though I wasn't trying to. And that was just, scaling production back, trying to, like I said, like I could make way more out of the square footage if it was the right, if I didn't have to worry about the smell or didn't have to, didn't have other things I needed to be doing. So it's crazy how small, how few really you need to feed. And I'm trying to feed about 250 snakes.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right, Kyle, I'll throw this question to you next. How are you sitting on your scale and then the time?
Scale right now, I think I'm running 14 tubs of 12 of mice and then 2 of African soft fur rats. I don't spend much time, maybe an hour and a half a week on them.
Yeah.
And then like he said, like Marshall said, going in for the periodic feeding and watering and stuff like that. But that's negligible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and for everyone who's looking at who's watching the video right now, you see how many cages are behind Kyle, and there are 3 times as many of that in the rest of that room. I mean, you're feeding hundreds upon hundreds of snakes out of 14 breeder tubs. I mean, that says a lot about what you can do at a very small level.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it helps that I keep mostly Montana rattlesnakes and dwarf adders, so they don't eat that much. So I'm lucky there. Plus, I keep them pretty cool in the room, so their metabolism's a little lower.
Yeah,
you can definitely do more with less with mice.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I even produce enough to have surplus, especially through the wintertime, to stock my freezer up in case I need to feed stuff a little bit extra as well.
You ever messed with Paramiscus?
I'm sorry?
You ever done Paramiscus, the deer mice?
I have not, no. I've thought about it, but I haven't.
Yeah. An old buddy of mine down there, Tim Gebhard, used to have an albino strain of Paramiscus that he raised. Yeah. Down in Utopia, Texas. That's north of San
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think you were telling me about those at one point, Stephen.
I think it was the African dwarf mice.
Okay, maybe so.
Yeah. I think Russ Gurley had a group of those, and I was trying to get some. I just couldn't make it work. The annoying thing about those, I think they had like 2 baby litters, but the babies are like half a gram. They're like abysmally small. So,
crazy.
I mean, a baby chondro could take care of that, no problem. I mean, a baby, baby arboreal viper.
For tiny colubrids, like that stuff is great.
Yeah. So that was my thought there. This is actually a good question from Brandon about feeder lizards, because Kyle, you use a decent amount of feeder lizards. I know the answer, but are you producing feeder lizards?
I am not producing feeder lizards. No, I go out and collect mine.
Yep. And that's the beauty about living in this part of the country, is that your feeder lizards are just at your own disposal to go get them yourself. So beautiful thing. All right, Patrick, how about you? What's your scale? How long does this take you?
I too can walk out onto my front porch right now and collect feeder lizards, because I have Mediterranean house geckos all over my house. Just fucking lovely. Especially with they do, and especially with low metabolic rate vipers. Like my Laticinctus male, he's a tiny little thing. In the last 15 months or so, I've given that thing like 5 or 6 geckos and 2 fuzzies, and he looks fucking fantastic on that. But and I realized I never answered the initial question. What got me into it was the first time I bred rodents was at a pet shop in the 90s, and we had like warehouse section. So it was a pretty sizable operation. It's kind of tricky to manage in Texas because we used that warehouse for like storing stuff. And so the bay doors would come open a lot, and managing temperatures was something. And, but that's been so long ago, I barely remember like any of the details of it, but we had a pretty serious operation over there. Currently, I just started breeding exclusively ASF, and just last year around May, I want to say, is when I saw a guy on in a local Facebook group. Look, I've had this on my mind for a while, but I saw a guy on a local Facebook group selling just a turnkey operation, vision rack and a whole bunch of adults and feed and bedding, just everything, the whole operation. And so I gave him $800, and I mean, I killed off 90 some odd animals right off the bat and fed those off. That took versus what ASF cost to buy. I mean, that was a huge chunk of what I spent right there in there. Yeah. And I've always liked the ASF. I started having friends breeding those about 16 years ago, something like that, 17 years ago. And I always thought they were kind of an ideal prey size for chondros, the adults. And being that they're actually technically a mouse, they're just when they're prime, they get fat like anything else. If you run them all the way out, they get fat like anything else. But when they're prime, they're just really lean animals, and I like their size and their structure for green trees.
Yeah.
So that's what got me interested in it. I was hoping to be able to feed my chondro collection with all ASF, but turns out that my chondro collection is a little bit big for my ASF operation.
Really? That's crazy.
I don't have it fully dialed in yet. So I have one vision rack with 6 tubs. I just recently started doing, based on our conversations, started doing 1.6 instead of 1.4 in those tubs. And I've got a couple of grow out cages, and that's it. That's the whole thing. Okay. There's no mice, no rats, just ASF. And I actually usually have Zach do the rats for me when it's just one of the things he does when he comes over.
Okay.
Shout out to Zach. It's nice having a helper that I can pay with snakes. And but when I do it myself, the rack is nothing. It's nothing. Like Kyle just said, the amount of daily maintenance work on it, just checking water and scraping food back over the top or throwing something in a tub, it's a negligible amount of time. It takes me literally 2 minutes or something to do that. But if I break it down and do like a quick clean where I'm setting up tubs and swapping out and all that, I can run through that rack in 15 minutes or something like that. Like it's really, really easy. The grow out tubs take a little bit longer because there's more animals in there and I'm having to take them apart and move all the animals and clean it out. But I can clean the whole thing. I'm not talking about scrubbing deep clean, but I can wipe off the rack, change out all the tubs, feed and water everybody, and sweep the floor in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
And that's I should do it every 5 or 6 days. I've discovered they can go about 9 before I can smell them outside of the closet that they're in. So that's the absolute maximum. But if there's a bunch of animals in the grow out, that's a twice a week thing too. It depends on how many animals are in those tubs. But they're all in a laundry room closet, so there's an exhaust fan, and it's perfect little setup.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean there's a reason why I chose the people I did for this podcast, was that we're all doing this on a little bit of a different scale. So it kind of gives everyone who's listening perspective of what your needs might be. One of my goals of this was kind of to make this seem a little bit more achievable for somebody who might be a little this might be a little daunting to them, the prospect of breeding rodents. I guess I'll answer the question myself real quick. I have 10 breeder colonies of mice at 1.7. I'm probably going to dial it back to 1.6. And then 8 breeder colonies of African soft furs, 1.6 as well, and then 4 raise up tubs for each species. And probably cleaning is like an hour and a half a week. If I have to do a lot of sorting with the weans, maybe a little closer to 2 hours, but still very, very manageable amount of time. We had a comment in the chat that I think would be, one that we can kind of run through quickly. Method for euthanizing, freezing the rodents. I figured that we all probably have a similar answer, but Mark, I'll start with you.
I use CO2 gas. So I have I think it's a 100-pound tank. It comes up to my chin. But I have a chamber that I just put a little, it doesn't take much, and they just kind of go out. There's actually, there used to be, I don't know if this is still the case with the American Veterinarian Association, that they set out rules, and there's a couple approved ways of euthanizing rodents. And one of them is to cervically dislocate them, which is breaking their neck. CO2 gas or euthanasia solution, which we don't want to do that. So, it is okay technically to cervically dislocate them. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, when you're feeding one snake, that's a much easier process than firing the whole system. Yeah. And potentially even more humane if you really get to the nuts and bolts of it.
Right. Debatable.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, please, by all means, teach us.
Well, I mean, I think that depending on how you gas them, you can gas them to where they're pretty much out very quick.
Okay.
When you're cervically dislocating them, unless you're really good at it, they kind of know something's coming.
True. That is true.
I mean, the main thing with the rodents that I try to do, because I put down a lot of rodents. We all have. Then, the worst thing in the world is when I start thinking about these rats and I throw them in there with the snake, and I don't get pleasure out of that. But what I do with the rodents is, I mean, they get the utmost care. They're in a temperature controlled area. I mean, it's peaceful there. They're not overcrowded. And I think the better you take care of your rodents, they give that back to you.
Yeah. I mean, there's no questioning that the level of stress correlating cortisol release, neurotransmitter balance in these animals makes a difference as far as the quality of feeder you're giving to your snake at the end of the day. If you have stressed out, dirty, crowded rodents, that is not as healthy as a rodent coming out of the setup that you just described, Mark.
Right. And we're all feeding our own snakes, so we want to do that. I can't go buy rodents to feed my snakes, first of all, let alone ones that I would feel. I mean, I've seen other rodents, and some are fine and look good, but I've seen so many over the years that people feed dog food or pig chow, dinner things. They're just not getting the proper balance, and it shows. They're beating each other up. They're just not good.
Yeah, absolutely. Do any of the other guys have a different answer to this question than Mark? I don't want to go around unless we're all going to say the same. If we're going to say the same thing,
it's basically the same for me. Although, while my operation supposedly in the ad came with a CO2 chamber, it wasn't built out and it wasn't the right thing. And I do CO2, but I just use dry ice. Whether it's I will often euthanize a bunch of stuff when I get my frozen rodent shipments in, because they come with dry ice, and so I can just do it right then and there. And I also have a spot where I can get it really cheap on my way home, and so hot water on dry ice, and dude, they go to sleep in like 5 seconds, and they're dead inside of 30 seconds, and it's really, really easy. I also will do cervical dislocation, and I'm really, really good at it. And if it's a couple of a handful of hoppers for chondros or something like that, it's a quick pinch. I tend to kind of agree with both things, that maybe it's over with just a little bit faster, but like Mark said, by the time they're nervous from the CO2, they're already going unconscious.
Yeah.
But they, when you pin them, they do kind of know that something's going on. And while I have euthanized by hand just thousands of rodents being in the pet, growing up in the pet trade and whatnot, I used to be desensitized to it. Now I do not fucking like it.
Yeah.
So the worst thing I do now,
Yeah, it doesn't get easier.
And I know this is like my hippie side coming out, but I'm not joking. It's not always out loud, but it's always at least in my head, but usually out loud. I say thank you, I'm sorry every single fucking time. I can't I can't help it. I'm like, thanks for feeding my snakes. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone who's listening thinks that there wouldn't be the kind of person who would feel bad about doing that, don't keep snakes. Don't feed rodents.
Yeah, don't do it.
Follow none of our advice.
We're all animal lovers. I mean, I
that's right.
Say we all love all animals. And
I also like my ASF way more than any mice or rats that I ever bred back in the day. They're fucking cool animals, man.
Yeah, they're super cool, man.
Yeah, they're smart and they're a little more individualistic and they're really pretty and soft. I really like them as animals. They're super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Marshall or Kyle, anything to add?
Same way here.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I do different is instead of having a 100-pound CO2 tank, I have 2 small ones. That way, one's always full, and they're just a little easier to manage for me. But other than that,
where do you get yours, Marshall?
I get mine. There's a place called Air Gas, and I don't know if they're nationwide for sure. They're in the South. They specialize in welding supplies and
here. That's where I got mine from. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I have a thing on that strapped to my wall where I can strap up maybe 2. I think I have a 10-pound and a 20-pound. And when one runs out, I just switch the rig over to the other one, and then sometime in the next couple days or weeks go get that. I mean, they last me 6 months probably, if not longer than that. So I thought about just getting one bigger one and doing it less often, but then I was like, shit. Then if it runs out or whatever. This way, I've always got a full tank there, and a 100-pound tank is, that's heavy. That's like moving that thing around. Unless you have a duck.
No, I pick it up and put it in my truck and take it out.
Yeah,
it's heavy.
Yeah, that's no joke. That's a big son of a bitch.
It's bigger than me. I mean, it comes up to here,
Yeah.
Then I'm set for over a year,
Wow.
It's just the way I've done it for so long, and I could get smaller ones.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, if you only have to make that trip once a year, that's pretty nice.
Makes me stay in shape,
Yeah.
like the snow does that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into feeding next. Mark, I want to start with you. What feed do you use for your rodents?
I use Techlad, Harlan Techlad. It's called, they just, they've been bought out a few times. I forget what they're called now, but it's the same company, same feed. It's a lab diet. It's in it, and what this company does is they make food for the rodents that they sell. They sell to all the labs throughout the world for all different sorts of models. And it's a top-notch food. So
All right, cool. Marshall?
I use Missouri 6F.
Okay.
Which is like a combo. I think, and don't quote me on this because I honestly haven't done a bunch of research on it, but I believe 6F is the formula that you can use for both. It's good for mice and rats. They do make specific formulas, like I think maybe 9F, and there's a different one
that are mouse and rat specific. But for me, I just use the 6F. One thing to deal with. I go through I got a feed store that orders it for me. I buy half a pallet, which is I think 20 bags at a time, or 1,000 pounds or something like that. And I go through that about every, I don't know. I probably go through that every
6 months or something like that.
Okay. Have you used any
It's
of
about-
the higher fat content diets, or have you just always stuck with 6?
Man, I've tried. There was a my local feed store where I get Missouri. They're, I don't even know what you would call it. The mill, I guess, where they make all different kinds of, agricultural feed for horses and pigs and whatever. They started making a mouse food.
Okay.
I tried that for a while. I didn't go all in on it. I just tried it a little bit. Honestly, I just did it just to like tell the guys that I was like, yeah, I'll try it out. Tried it out, but like never really had any intentions of switching everything. Man, I'm too, I don't know. I just haven't cared that much about it. Like what I'm doing is working fine, and I'm not, it works good enough, and I'm not really trying to change it. So
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, Kyle, I'm going to throw it over to you now. And this is going to be where we take a little bit of a left turn. Tell us about the feeding.
I feed a mixture of probably 35 to 40 different grains, seeds, and oats, different nuts, things like that. About twice a week, I'll give them crickets or mealworms. And then I'll alternate nights of not doing that with providing like a squash and carrots and, different fruits.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I dive deep into it, to the point where when I do feed my stuff, I plan it out a couple of days in advance. I'll pull out the hopper mice from the bins that I want to feed from, and I don't give them any food or water for about 24 hours, and then I introduce a bunch of mealworms and crickets and spinach and carrots, and they just gorge themselves on that stuff. And then shortly after that is when I gas them and then feed them off directly to the snakes. Yeah.
Have you ever fed conventional diet, or have you been doing this the entire time?
I've been doing this the entire time. Since I started keeping mice, I knew what I wanted to do and how I wanted to go about it. It's why I started breeding mice, is because, yes, for feeding my collection, it turned into that. But I just started to think about everything that I could possibly do to keep my snakes as natural as possible. And part of that is, or actually a lot of that is what we feed them.
Right.
So, yeah, I just started experimenting and feeding all kinds of different things. And just over the course of the last, like I said, 8 years, I've developed what I think works really, really well. I think, Stephen, you can probably attest to.
Certainly can. Yeah.
What I'm doing. And it's made a huge difference in my collection. It's made a huge difference in the quality of my animals, huge difference in my breeding results. I average probably 35 to 45 litters a year. And I mean, for montane collections, that's not that's not a little number.
You attribute that mostly with the food?
The litter sizes, for sure. I attribute it to the food. And I would say that in general, it does help. It does help with the breeding and just the overall condition and health of the snakes, which directly correlates to how well they produce.
Yeah. So I guess first question before I get into kind of a deeper one, what would you say that increase is in your litter size from conventional rodents to now your rodents?
The number of babies and the size of babies has gone up. Okay. And I keep like a photographic journal, I guess you could say, of different litters throughout the last 20 years. And the sizes and the size of babies. Also how it translates into how well they do after they're born. Montane rattlesnakes, I don't know how many of you know, but they're notorious for being difficult to feed when they're babies.
Yeah.
Especially some localities, they can be really, really tough. Since I've been feeding my mice this way, I've not had a hard time getting babies to eat at all.
That's
awesome.
pretty incredible. Yeah, I mean, especially with
cool,
something
yeah.
like, you know, I mean, you know, Marshall and Patrick, maybe there's something there with chondros, another notorious
Yeah.
feeder, something to be discovered there with that. I mean, you know, Marshall, you got the mice for it, you know.
Yeah.
Could definitely be
Yeah.
interesting.
I think the difference would be is that, you know, there still would be, I'm sure, some benefit, but if you're feeding off hoppers that are basically gut loaded, is what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
These are just pinks, you know, so
Right.
to get baby chondros going. So there'd probably be less of a benefit, but I think that, yeah, I mean, it would seem like, because you wonder, like, what could be causing that difference? Is it like the way the rodent smells? Is it, you know, shit, who knows? But that it's cool that you have seen that kind of a difference.
Well, Kyle, do you want to speak to that?
I just think again, it translates, you know, from, I don't know, any species really. I mean, you feed a certain animal the same thing every single day. It's the baby is going to be a direct result of that, right? I mean, or the babies are going to be a direct result of that, which again translates into the pinkies. I feel like being of a higher quality than something kept on maybe a singular diet.
Yeah.
How do your mice do? What's your production like in your mice? Litter sizes and what kind of mice are you using?
So they're Charles River, I believe, CD-1 mice, and they do great. I mean, I think my biggest litter sizes are right in the 18, 19 range. And they're small. The pinkies come out super small.
Mice stay pretty calm and all that.
Oh yeah, they're great. Yeah, I've been working with that line of mice for 8 years, and they're again, I think most of Stevens, if not all, come from me, and they're great mice.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And what I can say,
I've done, like, I've fed years ago, back when I was doing colubrids, and I used to feed a lot of bird seed to the mice, and I'd give them like Crisco for fat, you know, just go plop a spoonful of Crisco grease on top of it, you know. So when I'd feed them the bird seed, all I'd hear is this crunch, you know, bird seed crunching, and then that Crisco would disappear like within minutes. They were on. They loved that. You know, I used to play around with a lot of that stuff, and I finally kind of came to the conclusion after a lot of discussions with a lot of people that, you know, mice, you know, the lab that I get my food from, that's what they do. They do mice and rats, and they've formulated this food to give that animal all the nutritional things that they need. You know, like, in other words, like us as humans, you know, we argue about diet all the time, but we're kind of made to eat, you know, meat and, you know, what we're made to eat. You know, if we switched radically from that, we kind of see the results. And I've always kind of looked at it that way. But the way you describe your diet that you're feeding them, you're giving them a pretty big variety. And I'm sure they're getting everything they need out of that. Maybe more, they might be a little short on this or that. But that's interesting how you gut load them and then feed them to your stuff that way. And you're lucky you got a small enough mouse collection that you can do that with, you know.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. Doing it on a large scale would be.
My mouse collection, you know, my rodent operation got so big that I couldn't keep doing that. And birdseed used to be able to get 50 pounds for $2.50. And it was a good mix, you know.
Yeah.
You know, prices are a little different now.
Sure are.
Yeah, it definitely.
Where are you
definitely makes a
sourcing
big
all
difference.
Where are you sourcing all the ingredients from? Like you just getting them from, you get it online, or do you use, like, you mentioned 60 different nuts and oats and everything, like, is that just like, how do you buy it? I'm assuming you don't buy all that stuff individually.
No. There's a feed store here in El Paso that I buy the stuff from. It's called Gallo.
Okay.
And then the insects, I have another buddy who owns a pet shop here, and I get all that from him.
And when they eat the insect, you're just dumping like live crickets or something in there, and they just go after them, or what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and they love them. I mean, they turn into little animals, like little savages, man. They chase them around and run on them, and it's crazy.
You could gut load the crickets with calcium.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've experimented with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't know that they were even like omnivorous. I didn't realize they would eat crickets or bugs.
Oh, dude, throw some crickets in with your mice one of these days and see how they react.
I have to try that.
Yeah, they turn into little monsters, dude. It's fucking
really
awesome.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yes.
They go crazy for them, especially the African softers. Those things love mealworms. They love them.
That's what I like doing, and I love watching them because the worms try to bury into the substrate instantly. As soon as they hit the substrate, they start burrowing down. And I think it's a lot of enrichment for those rats to have to go and forage and dig around and pull them out. But they grab them and just, dude, they fucking chow down. You can hand them to them, pull out the tub, and just give them to them by hand, and they just snatch them. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Yeah, I think we're talking about all this from like a practicality standpoint for our animals, for our collections, monetarily. It's also fun, like at a certain level. I think especially like what myself, Patrick, and Kyle are doing, the scale that we're doing. This could be a lot of fun to deal with these little rodents. I mean, have like MORPH projects damn near with like, especially with the soft furs. I know all three of us do that. I mean, there's definitely a lot of enjoyment to be had from breeding rodents.
So one important thing is that, we should talk about is let's not get into trading rodents.
Yes.
Biosecurity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest mistake that people make. They think they 100%. Need to add some fresh blood or do this or that. Just once you get a healthy colony, don't bring any other ones in.
Yeah. I heard Eugene Bissett saying the other day on a podcast, Stephen, you and I talked about this when I was asking you about introducing blood. Yeah. And he said that he had been running the same lines of rodents for 35 years straight without introducing any new genetics. And then Stephen, you told me that you hadn't seen any evidence that there was any issues with just continuing to use the same animals. Yeah.
So I think my mice have been. I have the same colony of mice that I've had for years that I got, and when I got them, this was a good 28, 29 years ago now. They were 50 years out of the lab, so these are almost coming up on 80 years out of the lab.
Damn.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
That's incredible.
I've heard horror stories of people trying to do that, introduce new blood into their rodents, and then everything crashes.
Just everything dies. Yeah.
When rodents crash, they crash quick. It's not like
they can. Yeah, they can.
Yeah. And that, and like Mark, what you were saying earlier, how long it takes to reestablish something after an issue. That's just not worth it, especially if you're relying on this for your animals. The risk of jeopardizing that colony, very little is worth that. So
biosecurity is the most important thing I do, and I used to have people get pissed off at me all the time or accuse me of like, oh, you're just trying to keep everything secret, with your, like, no, I'm not, man. It's like, you have no idea. And so it's, biosecurity first with rodents, and with the reptiles too. So.
Yeah. So, Mark, I want to throw out a question kind of related to this food topic. What do you think could be the potential downfalls of some of these, like the processing of the diet, like a processed pellet compared to what Kyle's doing with more whole food items? What do you think the potential loss in micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, et cetera, could be from that processing?
Well, that's a whole, we could talk for a long time on that. I'm a big, there's a certain amount, but then you have to look at what we're doing. We're trying to make it as easy as we can. We're trying to be as productive as we can. And I think when you're doing, there's other risks that come along with what Kyle's doing. If you're doing it on a large scale, which I'm not doing anymore, but I think when you give yourself an opportunity to introduce a lot of pathogens that way, where the rodent feed, that's actually comes in pretty clean. It's auto-labelable. It's a clean product. Like the stuff I get comes in on clean trucks. It's lab grade stuff.
Right.
There's no messing around. So for a large scale, I think it makes perfect sense. And you probably do lose a certain amount of nutrient value in the processing. They cook everything, and it's a pressed pellet, so it's kind of heated then when all that process is taking place. But it's not. I'd say it's not enough to really, make that big of a difference with what most of us are doing.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what Kyle's doing and you're playing with, I think, and Patrick, I think those are great things. Play around with it. That's good.
Yeah, and I think your point about the scale is really important to mention. Of this, it doesn't scale up the way rodents scale up. If you're doing it to a T of how Kyle is doing with as much, as meticulous as he is, if you're running a scale like yours, Mark, or even twice that size, you're going to be putting a lot of effort into that feeding, where Kyle can do it very reasonably.
Right.
Scale that he's
we used to go through 1.5 tons of feed a week. Yeah. Those are 33-pound bags, so that would have been over 100 bags a week.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know how that goes.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. So, Kyle, I want to kind of ask you a question on the same topic. So, I guess a preface question: when you were working at the pet store with the rodents, were they being fed a conventional diet?
Yeah.
And then, so in your experience of dealing with those rodents and now your own, what are some of the main differences in the rodents themselves that you've seen from the diet? Not necessarily the end product of the snakes, but the physical body of the rodents and how their lifestyle is.
I think they have they look better. They have a better coat.
I agree.
And I haven't. Again, I've never bred rodents myself that have been fed a conventional diet.
Right.
But I've been in places that have fed a conventional diet, and I'll tell you that the difference in smell is absurd.
Good point.
Yeah.
Mine don't smell near as much as some of the stuff I've been around that's been fed a conventional diet.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah,
especially compared to dog food. We used to at the pet store. We were a distributor for a specific brand of dog food, and it was really high quality dog food. But that's what all the boss would let us feed to the rodents there. And dude, the smell with those fucking rats, and it just. To be fair, ASF just smell less than those animals do. But yeah, when it's a night and day difference for sure.
Yeah,
that's the worst thing about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. Without a doubt. And that can't be overstated. But if you don't have very many of them, and also another thing that Kyle has taught me and I've learned from my own experience, if you're doing it on a small scale, pony up for that bedding. The really high quality fine shit from Petco and PetSmart will take that and decrease it by 80%.
Yeah.
It's
I could buy I could buy the $5 shit at Tractor Supply. That honestly, as much as the smell is a concern, I look at that stuff and I think about my cute little rats and their feet, and I'm like, that shit just doesn't look comfortable at all. Yeah. And so I buy the expensive fluffy shit from Petco or from PetSmart.
So does that makes a difference? That makes a difference in the smell.
Makes the smell dramatically.
Yeah,
dramatically.
Really?
And it's the urine smell, because it's so much more absorbent, and you'll get all the urine they'll all urinate in the same spot, and it'll be packed down into one little corner of the tub, and it just all sticks right there. Whereas the like thicker shredded shit that they sell at Tractor Supply, it is just not absorbent. It's the same thing with snakes, man. That's why I keep my bull snakes on Carefresh. Well, I use the off brand. That shit's expensive, and the bull snakes are messy animals, but it clumps up and spot cleans really well.
Yeah.
And it keeps the smell down way better than cypress mulch does.
I do also put a layer of pellets, of pine pellets down, so that helps. And prior to that,
like a little drainage layer.
Yeah. So I'll do like, it's basically just, I have my scoop count for whatever size tub I'm doing, and it's just enough to put like a one pellet coating across the bottom. So I don't it doesn't have to be real thick, and then I'll put a shitload of the I get everything from Tractor Supply though. But I think that before I started doing the pellets, they used to make this stuff called, like Rico turned me on to. It's called Yesterday's News, and it was basically like the same thing as a pine pellet, but it was newspaper. So it was a news shredded or super fine, chopped up, recycled newspaper with the gelatin jacket on it. That as soon as it would get wet, it would just become super absorbent, and that was way better for the smell and also for the dust. Way less dust, but they quit making it for some reason. It was a shitload more expensive. So that
only lasted a couple years, didn't it? That was only around for a few years, huh?
Well, it was around for like up until maybe 3 years ago, for as long as I've been doing the rodent. So I mean, it was around for a while. I don't know when it first came on the market, but like you could use it for cat litter, I think. But yeah, it was like 4 times as expensive as the pine pellets. Yeah.
Marshall, are you using those pine pellets in your like birthing tubs as well, or just in like the larger raise up or breeder?
I use them in everything. I use what in the birthing tubs, like if I had it to do over again, I would have gotten the taller birthing tubs for the rats, because basically what I have is just like a 10 series tub, same thing that most people keep baby ball pythons in, same thing as the mice racks. I'll just use one of those for one pregnant rat. And they're too shallow, so they can they'll push stuff out. They can put like I said, push shavings out. They can, if they pile everything up on one side and it's the side where the water nozzle is, sometimes it makes it harder for them to get water, and I think the water probably drips, and that end of the tub gets built up with so
you can get a mini flood just from that. No nozzle issue, no line issue. You can get a mini flood just from mounding up too much bedding under that nozzle. It can get gross. So so okay, and I reason I asked that question is that I've never personally done that using the pellets in birthing tubs, and primarily because Forrest had told me that he had issues with pinkies essentially drying out from those pellets, making the tub too dry. Have you ever experienced that?
No, I never have. I find that most of the time the mothers will they separate it all out. So like when I throw it in there, it's I just throw a layer, like I said, coat the bottom with a layer of pellets, and then I'll put maybe 2 or 3 inches in a bigger tub of shavings on top. But in the birthing tubs though, they'll separate. They'll build a nest. They'll take the shavings, and they'll pile them up on one side.
That's awesome. Mark, do you have any insight on that topic of the pellets drying out pinkies?
No, not really. I tried those pellets years ago, and I just didn't really see much benefit with them, to be honest with you.
Okay.
In the way we were doing things, and I was pretty happy with the bedding I was getting. I like the fluffy stuff. They can kind of nest in that. Marshall, what numbers are you keeping on your mice?
1.4 in
a
in a 10
1.4 per tub in a 10 series, and then I've got like some grow out. So as soon as they're weaned, I'll grow them out. The mice that I have now are really small. They produce really small pinks, so it takes longer to grow them up to like, you know, like a jumbo. For me to get a jumbo is like a 9-month-old mouse or something like that. It's a retired breeder, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How long do you let your mice go?
Usually I see production start dropping off at like between 8 and 10 months. So with the rats, I'll usually do like a year, just because, you know, I don't know why. Production probably still does drop off a little bit. But to me, like the way I do it, I've tried to figure out some kind of way where I could cycle them, you know, or I wouldn't have to replace all of them at once. But just at the way that I do it, it's having to keep these in this tub and these with these groups together. Like, you know, it's kind of a free for all, man. Like I'm not separating them. So like once a year, I try to time it to when, okay, this is when I'm the lowest on babies. And then wipe everything out over the course of a couple of weeks and then start building it back up again. And it usually takes from at the end of the year I do it, and we're 3 months in, and I feel like just this week or last week I've started back to where I've got surplus again. For the last couple of months, it's been just enough to feed everything, and maybe this male doesn't get fed this week because I don't have enough rats. But I mean, barely. And now, like this week, I've got, you know, I told my guy I've got, I don't know, probably 100 weaned and smalls that I could dish off to him. So
that's the cool thing about keeping ambush predators, boids, and vipers is there's always males that you can skip a meal and it will not make a difference whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're a little late on our commercial break. I want to hit it, and I want to go deep into this conversation, Mark and Marshall, that you guys just started. Before we do that, though, Patrick, we never hit you with that food question, so I want you to answer that real quick, and then we'll go to the commercial break.
Sure. So, you know, I have the vision racks, and on top of the grate, I keep a commercial diet on there all the time, and every day I walk in there and scrape it over and make sure there's some there. I use either the Missouri, the breeder one, I think it's the 6F, or it's like Kalmbach or something like that, spelled with a K.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more expensive than the Missouri is. When I bought the operation, it came with a whole bunch of it, and I've bought it one other time since then, so it's been kind of back and forth. I also additionally, so I have a friend who redistributes donations that her organization, that's surplus for her organization. So I get all kinds of free, just random pet supplies if I go see her. I get substrates and puppy pads. She hooks me up on a lot of my pads for the chondros, and I'll take whatever she's got and I'll throw it in a bin. So something like right now, there's some chicken feed in there, and there's some cat food in there, and I'll use that as pelletized treats, but just like little bitty scoops once or twice a week or something like that. As a staple for supplemental food, in addition to the pellets that they get on top of the rack, I use a lot of black seed. They love that shit. I also occasionally get like fancy rodent chows from my friends. So it's like just a combination of a whole bunch of, you know, seeds and corn and grains. I'll give them oats. Every day I run through there, almost every day I run through there and scrape the food back on top, and then throw just a little scoop of something different into the tubs. And I also feed the grow outs a little bit more variety than I'm feeding the breeders. And so in addition to any kind of like dry stuff like that, I give them apples. I eat a lot of bananas. I throw the peels in there. They love that. I'll feed them straight bananas. When I'm chopping up vegetables for myself, cutting the ends off of asparagus or cutting the stems off of greens or any kind of veggie scraps that I have from my kitchen, I go and dump in there. So I'll just share some of my stuff with them too, you know, if I'm just cutting stuff up. So I'll have like a Ziploc bag sitting in my fridge with just random veggie scraps from dinner or whatever. And then also anytime blueberries are on sale, they fucking love blueberries, dude. And so I like anytime that the store has cheap blueberries, I'll throw a big old fistful of blueberries in every bin for a few days. And also occasional superworms or mealworms. And Amber had given me a whole bunch of dried black soldier fly larvae as well, and they loved that too. So just all kinds of random stuff, but the staples are the commercial diet and some types of seeds and grains.
Okay, awesome. Well, we are going to head to our commercial break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of the break, we have much more conversation to get to.
Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Diversity when it comes to a reptile diet, I feel like is so important. So this is why I'm proud to announce today's sponsor, Blake Exotic Feeders over in Florida.
What is up, everybody? Blake here, the owner of Blake's Exotic Feeders. We have all quail available at all times, produced here at my ranch from button day old, from Conturnic day old, all the way to extra large Conturnic quail. If you guys have any questions, DM on Instagram. Appreciate the support, you guys. Make sure you guys hit me up. We have all the quail like I mentioned, and everything is shipped right here from my house.
If you want the #1 quail sent to your doorstep and more importantly fed to your reptile, no better company than to go to than Blake Exotic Feeders. #1 quality in quail, hands down, and I gotta tell you, my reptiles love it just as much. It'll give you a peace of mind to know that these quail are grown on his property and it's not bought third party. Head over to his website, Blake Exotic Animal Ranch, to place your order, or you could just hit him up directly on Instagram. Let him know that the Trap sent you and he'll take extra good care of you. Thank you so much, Blake, for supporting the Trap, and also thank you so much for sending me top quality homegrown quail for my animals. One of the things I love about being a part of the reptile industry is all the learning, okay? Learning can be fun, and I can prove that to you. Thank you so much to today's sponsor, it's Gary Scavino over at gs.reptiles. I highly recommend you head over to his YouTube channel, follow all this man's content when it comes to learning about rare species of snakes you could be keeping in the hobby, and also just finding out how easy a lot of these rare species of snakes are to keep in general. So thank you so much, Gary Scavino of GS Reptiles. Again, head over to his YouTube channel. Also head over to his Instagram to be on top of all of his current work and be ready for a big year over at GS Reptiles. Thank you so much, Gary, for your ongoing support. I really appreciate it. Chee! For the #1 PVC enclosures in the reptile game, no better place to visit than Focus Cube Habitats. Excited for today's sponsor, Focus Cube Habitats, #1 enclosures in the reptile game by far. Everything you see behind me are 3x2x2 PVC design enclosures by Steven and Ashley over at Focus Cube Habitats. They're based out of Texas. If you head over to their website, you can select from over 30 plus different enclosure designs that they've done. Two of the hardest working people in the reptile hobby today, and I'm so excited to add more Focus Cube enclosures. So much again, Steven and Ashley. I appreciate the 5+ years of partnerships that we've had together. Looking forward to growing more. Head over to focuscubedhabitats.com, head over to their YouTube channel, subscribe, and check them out on Instagram. Thank you so much, Focus Cube Habitat. When you think about building a good community and being a leader of that community, nobody comes to mind better than Marc Hager over at Texas CHONDROS. That's right. Make sure you head over to TX CHONDROS on Instagram, and also head over to Marc's website, see what he has available green tree python wise, and be ready for quite the 2025 green tree python breeding season out of Marc Hager. He's a veteran in the green tree python game, one of the best and nicest breeders in the green tree python game. He's been putting on the whole state of Texas for as long as I've known him. So if you want to see all the amazing other chondro keepers out of the state of Texas, another good reason to go follow Marc Hager over at TX Chondros on Instagram. And again, head over to his website, texaschondros.com. You can find all the links in the description below. Thank you so much, Marc Hager, for supporting the Trap. Chee!
All right, everybody, we are back. Before we get into it, man, shout out to everybody who's in the comments right now watching the live. This is up there with my most watched ever live podcast, so that is most appreciated. I was kind of expecting that considering the lineup that we have, but nonetheless, very appreciative of everybody. Before we get back into some of those breeding conversations, I want to hit a few chat questions that have been sitting here for a minute. So hemp bedding, has anyone ever used hemp bedding for your rodents?
Nope.
I haven't.
Me either. Patrick?
No, I have not.
All right. Well, sorry we couldn't be any help there. And then Lisa's asking exact brand recommendations for the bedding. I don't know for myself exactly what brand it is that I'm using, but I get it from PetSmart. It's like the pine shavings. They have like a green label. They're like usually like $10 to $15 a bag, something like that. So
I use Full Cheeks. I think
might
they're
be it.
the two brands that they have the most of are going to be the KT brand, and then I use the Full Cheeks.
Okay. Marshall, you said you're doing the tractor bedding?
Yeah, mine are over here living in the low rent district. We've got Tractor Supply.
Okay. So Lisa, I don't know if you're still here, but Kyle has his bedding, the natural soft.
Yeah, I don't think that's
that kind of
pine.
brand.
Is that pine, Kyle?
Yeah.
Okay, just a softer white pine. That's a white pine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could get white pine. I use just the stuff that I get at the hardware store about 5 miles down the road. I couldn't.
Yeah,
even
luckily this is only 5 miles down the road for me, so I lucked out.
Yeah, they cut timber in northern Minnesota, and then also we get a lot of Canadian wood products in, and it's always I have my choice of shavings. There's we have like the best shredded aspen over in Wisconsin, so I can get that dirt cheap here too.
Okay.
Which I
Really, you can get that as cheap as the pine, or cheaper?
Cheaper, yeah.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Yeah, like
It's crazy how variable that is depending on where you're at. Like here, cypress mulch here is dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And there's some places they can't even get it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh,
Out here, where
interesting.
Kyle and I are, we can't get cypress at all out here.
Yeah.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
I
like
can
here-
get it here in the spring. You know, the garden centers will carry it. All that.
It used to be $2 a bag here. It's $4 now. But it used to be $2 for like whatever 3 cubic foot bag. It's still dirt cheap.
But Patrick, when I used to buy that stuff for 99 cents a bag when I lived in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I bet down there for sure.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Aspen is really a good substrate. Like, but I mean,
that's what I use for all my ball pythons. In fact, that's what the lab, the Harlan lab. They're not Harlan now. I'm not sure what they call their labs, but
In vitro or something like that.
that's what they use in house on all their rodents. Is the shredded aspen. It's really clean, but the thing is, it dirties up really quick. So you have, the pine, good dried pine, preferably the white pine like Kyle has, I think is the best. And it's usually soft, the white pine. The stuff I use varies a little bit, but it's usually pretty good. It's a little more, I don't want to say sawdusty, but it's a little more like that. And I kind of like it for the rats,
Nice.
Yeah, the stuff that Stephen was talking about, the fluffier pine, that's fantastic for mice.
Yeah. I bet for rats they'd kind of tear that stuff up unless you gave them a lot of it, and then they probably throw it everywhere too. So the softwares do good. So.
Yeah,
I do prefer the aspen, but it's just it's hard to get. I mean, like I use a little bit of aspen for my colubrids, which are not many. It's like less than 10 adult animals, and I use the Santa chips, which I think they may be made by Harlan Tech Lab, that company you were talking about earlier. But
that's a hardwood chip.
Yeah, so I use so little of it that it's not that big a deal, but it's like $50 for a bag of freaking Santa chips off Amazon by the time you pay for shipping and everything. But it'll last me a year, but it just works so much better than anything else I've tried.
Those Santa chips, like I used to not like to keep any snakes on those because they can't digest those, and it would.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's hardwood, and where the shredded aspen, if they swallow, I don't worry about that. That's like real soft, and I mean, if you set aspen out to decompose, it's like the fastest decomposing wood there that. I mean, you can watch it decompose.
Huh. I did not know that.
Yeah, be careful with the Santa chips and snakes. You know,
Interesting.
That was my experience with it.
Okay,
Man, because it's interesting to hear you say that, because like I've been like throwing wet rodents in there for years, and you know the salmon chips stick to them, and I've never had a problem.
Be a little careful, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
very good
I
to
don't
know.
Yeah.
Well, we have another question here that definitely is a little over my head, but any thoughts regarding increased magnesium intake from the seeds and whatnot Kyle's feeding, resulting in better breeding from his snakes due to increase in sex hormones? Take it away.
I'm definitely not. I don't know too much about sex hormones, so I couldn't tell you there. But if anybody else does, feel free.
If Northwest Herpetological, if you have any information, if you're still here, throw another comment down explaining this a little bit. The more that's getting into the weeds, but that's the stuff that we really need to know. That's the information that needs to get out there. So, yeah, I don't know either, but that would be pretty damn cool if that was the case. So
I wonder if his snakes were magnesium deficient.
Yeah, could very well be. So, okay, another question. Brandon, if you're still here and you want to clarify this, I'm pretty sure you left this comment when we were talking about food, but any foods to stay away from, and then I think probably more in regards to like Kyle, your style of feeding. Any items you avoid?
You broke up for the first part of that.
Oh, sorry. Any food items that you avoid in your diet?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I don't feed, but I don't actively try to avoid anything in particular. No.
Okay. The only thing that comes to my mind would be to like regulate items you're feeding that are high in oxalic acid. That would be something that I would probably say. So like
dark leafy greens.
Yeah, a ton of like like collards, kale, spinach. Those are all good, but maybe not a staple. I'm not sure if a kidney issue in a rodent would necessarily cause anything in a snake, but probably, I mean, nothing does well in a high oxalate diet. So that would be the only thing that I could think of.
I mean, other than maybe iguanas. I don't do really like if they're getting any greens from me, it's just a little bit of scraps from something that I'm eating. And I also don't do any peppers or onions. And I read that celery is not good in any significant quantity. I'm assuming that's like nitrates or nitrites or whatever that's in there. But yeah, so of things that I cook for myself that I avoid giving them scraps of, it's peppers, onions, and celery.
Yeah. Isn't citrus bad for rodents?
I don't know. I don't know, man. I used to know a guy. The first person to put it on my mind about like gut loading rodents for snakes, he was feeding his mice oranges and whole grain bread before feeding them off. But
I could be totally off base thinking of something else. So
but he wasn't breeding them himself, so he's not seeing any long-term like issues with that. I don't give mine much citrus fruit, but an interesting thing that I noticed is when because they mostly get apples, bananas, and blueberries. But an interesting thing I noticed is when I gave them strawberries, they seemed like they didn't like it, but then they like buried it and let it dry out, and then they ate it after it was dried out. I think it was maybe I think the tartness of it turned them off. And then every single group did it. They let it dry out before they would eat it with strawberries.
Wow, that's fascinating. Huh.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right. First of all, shout out to MJ. Very nice comment here. Appreciate you giving us the platform to be able to do an episode like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I assume probably no for everyone, but freezing bedding before use, my assumption would be to kill any pathogens or bugs that might be there. I've never done that. Mark?
No, you don't. You probably don't. You probably don't need to, because the bedding that you're using, pretty much all of the bedding comes from wood that's getting chopped up and it's wet, and then they put all of it in these big dryer tumblers that heat up, and then that kind of kills everything in the process.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that big of a worry. If anything, you could heat it up, at your place, or put it out in the sun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff's way overstated, like the necessity for like treating,
right?
People treat branches and shit that they put in their cages. I'm not saying it's not possible, but like snake mites don't come from substrate that you bought unless it came from a pet store that was completely infested with mites top to bottom.
I've seen wood mites, different wood mites and different.
Yeah, but they're harmless. Yeah, they're zero impact. Well, I get borers in wood or whatever. Brooke Bernston told me something a long time ago, because he would keep snakes in tubs and still have them on leaf litter, oak leaves from outside and just rocks and sticks. And he said, Patrick, these are snakes. They live in the dirt. If they're getting problems from some dirt and leaves we collected from outside, there's probably something else going on with that animal. Like I've just never seen any evidence of any consistent issues from putting plants or branches or anything like that in with your animals. It's not really a thing.
Yeah, I think we can
agree.
I think we can over sterilize way too much and scrub with soap and bleach and all. I don't use any bleach or any chemicals around the rodents. I very seldom scrub tubs. I just don't introduce any outside rodents. The reason I don't use bleach or any chemicals on the tubs on the rodents is I think it just stresses them out. What do we say? Our dogs have scent 50 times stronger than ours. So that residual that you're leaving on that or in the room is going to be an irritant to the nose, and the sinuses to the rodent.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Plus, it also kills all the smell of the rodent that was in that tub. With the mice, I don't switch tubs on the mice. When I set them up with a tub, they maintain that tub and I only breed mine for 6 months. They maintain that tub for the full 6 months, because when you go to switch these mouse tubs, you're putting that breeder group in with it where another male just was, and he'll start beating up the females. The females will start beating up each other. It's a stressor. Mice production, in my opinion, is all about keeping the stress low.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've known some people to do it successfully. I personally keep the same tubs for the same groups, but I mean, one mistake and now all the babies are killed and the adults are fighting. To me, that's a pretty big risk to take for maybe a minor convenience. But then again, some people do it successfully. So
yeah, it's interesting to hear you guys talk about it, because I don't keep the same one. I've really never noticed. I do notice them sometimes fighting a little bit, like right after I've put them in a new tub. But I mean, not for any extended period. And I've never seen them like every now and then you'll see one, and this is with 150 animals. You'll see one that got that's been beat up, or the back of their neck is whatever, been scratched or whatever. But I'll take it up. I don't use any chemicals or anything, but I'll take it, hose it out, scrub it with a brush, and put new substrate in it, and then I'll go to the next tub, take those rats out, so each one's getting the tub from their next door neighbor, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have I have doubles of all my tubs, and I just use free and clear dish soap. And so the clean tubs are already stacked up and ready to go. And I put substrate in them, and I use pine shavings and a big old handful of Timothy hay, and I just stack those tubs up, and then literally pull one tub out, slide that one in, and transfer all the rats over. and then dump that tub, and it goes into the dirty pile and gets scrubbed out with dish soap later on and dried out. And so they've been sitting for, however many days. That's how I'm able to go to do those so quickly. But yeah, and I'm not using anything other than free and clear dish soap.
Okay. Kyle?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Marshall, but whereas my animals get the previous house that their next door neighbor had.
Yeah.
But I don't go into any kind of depth in cleaning them. I take a little bit of F10 and spray it on a paper towel and wipe them out and put bedding in there and use it for the next ones. And I do the same thing even between my African soft fur rats to mice. I've used a mouse tub for a fresh pan of African soft furs and vice versa. And I've never seen any issues whatsoever. No fighting, no baby killing, nothing.
Awesome. Yeah. And that probably just is a testament to how keyed in or dialed in your group is in your room, to where that's completely not affecting them, where maybe in a larger production facility, maybe the stress is higher, more people are running through, employees, etc. So that stress might push them over the edge, where with your setup, you have that stress low enough to where that's not even an issue for them. So I think that's pretty awesome. We have a follow-up on that earlier magnesium topic. So both zinc and magnesium have been found to increase enzymes relating to hormone production, particularly relating to testosterone. Also increases, I'm going to try this, luteinizing.
Yeah, luteinizing.
Which trigger ovulation in females. That's super interesting to me. The only thing I would be worried about would be potentially overdosing these little animals with any way of supplementing them. I think some real legit study would need to be done to find the exact dose and frequency, but that could be a huge thing to study right there, as far as, taking this, what we're doing, to the next level. So that's a very interesting.
I just have to ask if what he's saying is actually related to rodent studies, because I study human nutrition a lot. Like I literally,
it's probably a human thing, because you heard on.
So listen to a lot of Andrew Huberman today. So here's the thing. When I'm like, I literally watch human nutrition videos every single day. I've been doing it for like 7.5 years, and kind of obsessed with it. And the one of the things that comes up over and over and over and over is the fact that so many of the studies are done on rodents, and how that shit just doesn't relate to human nutrition in the same way. Same thing with carcinogens and all kinds of stuff, man. Anybody who's kept rats long enough, they just kind of get cancer anyway. So I always think it's funny that when they were like, you read some tagline on the internet about, this food contains this compound, and this compound is known to the state of California as a possible human carcinogen. Well, what happens is they take rodents and they give them this compound in a dosage that's 10,000 times, literally 10,000 times higher than anything a human would ever come into contact with. And it causes cancer in some of those rats. And then they label that thing as a possible carcinogen. It's just really silly that people run with those things. And so you have to be real careful correlating certain micronutrients of even similar species, but rodents to humans is gets real tricky with that. And like Steven said, it's very easy to overdose something like zinc. And with so many things like that, the gap between the effective dosage and the toxic dosage, it can be very narrow. I'll give a really easy example of this that I actually use at work, because I sell pesticides for a living. So I have to talk to people to explain what toxicity actually is and means. And because people are always saying they don't I don't want to use chemicals. I don't want to spray chemicals around my house. Well, your fucking walls are painted with chemicals, and you're breathing chemicals and drinking everything is chemicals. We have no problem taking 500 milligrams of acetaminophen for a headache. That's Tylenol, acetaminophen. The dosage is 500 milligrams for an adult. The toxic dosage of acetaminophen in a human is 8 grams. That's the shut your liver down and kill you in 3 days dosage is 8 grams. And you have no problem taking 1/16 of that dosage, eating it for a fucking headache. So, you know, there's certain things where, like I say, the discrepancy between effective dosage, and ivermectin is an example of that in reptile medicine, where there's not a huge gap between an effective dose and a toxic dose. So that's something with any type of supplementation that you really have to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think I think if you take care of your mice and feed them a solid diet and they're healthy mice and your snakes are healthy, they'll, you know, I don't think, you know, trying to look at testosterone boosters in our male reptiles is going to really make that much of a difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of like what we're doing here is like, you know, we're laying out the baseline of what makes us all tick. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good point of you can, you know, you can overthink yourself and
focus more on your husbandry. And
right. If you don't have the baseline of it all, you know, hammered out, then don't even think about that type of stuff.
I like what Kyle's doing. He lives where his, you know, the species he keeps, he lives where they are.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, feeding them what he sees them eating, and feeding what they're eating what he sees that species eating. You know, so it's that's kind of a cool little deal there. Like here where I live, we have Western hognose snakes right up the road. I go every spring and summer and fall, and they people they have no clue. Those things' primary diet in the summer are painted turtle eggs. You know, they fill themselves up on turtle eggs. It's like
awesome.
I've seen them regurgitate them. I mean, they fill themselves up to the neck with them.
Oh wow.
It's pretty impressive.
Badass.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, to get kind of back to the topic of pre-commercial break, I think Marshall, you had mentioned about once a year. Mark, how often are you turning over your breeding stock for mice and rats?
I turn my stuff over very often, more often than probably anybody I know. My rats, I like to do no more than 3 litters on the females, and the males I like to turn them over at after about 4 to 6 months of breeding, sometime in that ballpark.
Wow.
Just because they just get bigger, they eat more food, they dirty up the tub that much more. The females, the female rats, I find that they really slow down after that 3rd litter. The other thing I do is I let all the rats get very mature before I let them start seeing each other. The female rats are probably 12 weeks before I pair them, and the males older than that. So, you know, I let them get quite mature. So it's a constant rotation. I kind of have a good solid system where it's simple, and if you can just establish a system of rotating everything through, to produce the numbers that you want, it can be done. You know, when we were big, it was a pretty simple thing. We recorded everything, and it was whatever we took out, breeder female wise, we had to put back in, or, you know, and you could adjust it on that number. The total pool of females, like Marshall's talking, he's got X number of females that are in production all the time. Same sort of thing. And if you just take notes and record that, you can develop a real easy system. We had a system on 7 days, you know, 7-day work week. Now it's kind of, you know, it's a little looser because I'm here 7 days a week typically. So
what gram weights are you shooting for introducing those males and females into breeding roughly?
I don't go by size. I go by age.
Okay.
But I would estimate the females are probably 170, the strain of rat I have, probably 160 grams, somewhere in that ballpark. Males, maybe 225, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Mice, I'll do the same thing with. I let the females get quite mature. I raise them, I selectively breed everything. Like the stuff that gets held back, we're picking that comes from the best litters, the strongest animals, moms that take the best care of the babies, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll let the mice grow up, I think they're 6 weeks before we pair them up, maybe longer than that. Okay. Males about, no, actually, I think it's more like 8 weeks, and males are like 10 weeks before we pair them. I mean, they are very mature.
Okay.
And then that way the females all lay, you'll get 4 litters at the same time. They stay on this, try to keep them on the same estrus cycle.
Okay.
And if we're lucky, we can accomplish that for like 3 litters.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When I was, doing the rats on a bigger scale, I was waiting for 200 to put females into breeding, 190 on the low end. And then with the males, I made the mistake early on of going with that same number. And I personally experienced that if a group of males in a harem style breeding situation, if a group of males went in with 40 females or whatever it was, and the males were smaller than the females, they wouldn't breed any of them.
None of them.
You'd have no pregnant females.
Then you'd screw up the females.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. So typically males were going in at like 250 to 275 with new girls, and then if a new male group had to go with returning females, they were closer to 300.
Yeah, I think my
because they were all mixed around, but
my strain's probably a little smaller than yours.
Yeah,
probably eats less food too.
Yeah. No, that was one thing that you had taught me that I ended up being like one of my kind of cornerstones of teaching people, like, keep them small. We are rotating these things through quickly. I think once you're at a scale, that's super important. Did you have like a ratio of grow out females to your total female population? Like you wanted to keep 30% growing out, 40% or whatever. Did you have anything like that as part of your regimen?
Well, the number one priority was what we were holding back.
Right.
So we would do 2 things. We would pick exactly what we wanted, the best animals, and then however many we needed, no matter what. It would fluctuate throughout the year depending on demand, but we would essentially hold stuff back every single week. So that way, and we were putting new females online every single week. Now, since we're much smaller, we like with the mice, we do like 2 levels each month.
Okay.
So if you figure that on how many levels, that would be 10 levels on 2 racks. They're all getting turned over in 10 months.
Yeah.
Or, within a year.
Yeah.
So that's the rats I just kind of do visually. I know by now when a rat's had its 3rd litter.
Sure.
And Eugene and I talked to Eugene. I think when Eugene got his rat thing going now, we talked about rats a lot back in the day, and how to determine those. And I think what he might do is use like a stain on the rats. They got like the labs do. They kind of stain them a color, and he kind of codes them that way.
Yeah.
I tried doing that. Mine will have, I've got some that are albino. Some of them are like, I don't know. I've got named like tuxedo ones that are all black and white. And then I've got like some gray and white ones and gray ones and some like ones that I call blonde. I don't know what the MORPH or whatever is. But I tried doing it that way where I was like, okay, I would try to save. I would like, prepare, try to save all the, like bring online, 10 black and white ones. And then I would write that down. And then I'd bring online, 10 gray ones and try to keep up with them that way. but it was, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I either got lazy or didn't pay attention. But that's one way you could do it too, unless you're working. I'm sure Eugene probably has like all of his are probably albino, I would think, huh?
Probably. I know mine are all hooded. I used to have all albino, and I had a company when I used to supply Petco. They didn't want all white stuff because I forget why.
They don't sell as well. Albinos just don't sell as well as patterned rats do in the pet trade.
Yeah. So I went ahead and did that and got everything turned over to hooded.
Okay.
You know, and that's
hooded,
what actually I picked up a smaller strain of hooded, and that worked out real good actually. So
is that just where like the head and the neck's one color and the body's white, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
They got like a black stripe down their back. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. I just call them hooded rats.
Like Forrest had us kind of like doing like ear tagging to track stuff for a while, different size, and I didn't really like that. They would rip them out. They would the process of doing the ear tag was kind of
in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, having to restrain all the rats. What I had ended up doing, which I think kind of worked, and Mark, I want to know your take on that, was just going off of litter size. So like if a mom had like 9 babies or less, she would be retired out. And the goal was to over time work that up to where the floor on that litter number kept raising. So like eventually, if they have 11 or below, that's their last litter. We're shooting for 14 or 15. Do you think that's a reasonable way to go about it?
Yeah, that's one way to go about it. And you can kind of use that as like little guides. You know, and I always make I look at them, and you know, if they look like they're getting tired or anything like that, because you can go from that litter of 12 and 15. I mean, they can drop down to a litter of 5 real quick, and that's just like a complete waste. You know, so that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I found, you know, they can probably go 4 or 5 and give, you know, up to 10, but and you know, again, they're bigger, they're eating more food, it takes them a little more time to get pregnant. They're not as good of moms, you know, they might smother a couple babies, you know, so it's just there's a number of reasons I like to keep them, you know, just 3 litters.
Yeah.
You know, at max. Sometimes it's only 2. If they give me a bad litter right off the bat, I don't even try them again.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, you know, unfortunately at scale, you got to kind of be a little bit brutal. You know, as far as that goes, you kind of have to take any of the emotion out of it of like,
well, what you're doing is you're trying to improve the whole herd.
Right.
You know, as you go to you know, the ones that the younger ones that aren't given good litters, you kind of want to wean that on out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kyle, I want to throw this question to you about your breeder stock. How often you turn them over?
About every year, about once a year.
Okay.
And I don't notice the same in the mice that I do that and as Mark does in the rats. In fact, I think some of my younger females have, you know, smaller litters and aren't as good of moms as opposed to some of my females that are 6, 7, 8 months old.
Okay.
I feel like probably from about the 5 to 9 or 10 month range, my females are in their prime, spitting out, you know, 17 to 19 babies.
Okay. Yeah. I do it a little more frequently. I would say I'm probably looking about every 6 months right now that I'm turning colonies over. The mice I haven't really seen many issues with. It's kind of more just my programming is that way. I have seen decline in the soft furs once they get to about that point. It may also be because I'm running a larger ratio in those tubs. Like if I had a 1.3 or a 1.4 in the same space, maybe they would have more longevity. But I think the amount of production that I'm getting out of 1.5 and 1.6 justifies the turnover. But yeah, definitely not quite as frequently as with rats. Patrick, I know your colony is still in its infancy, but what's your plan as far as that goes?
So I'm starting to do it more frequently, and it's per hour conversation about that not too long ago. And there's a couple of interesting things that I've noticed. I have one colony right now that I probably started, and I need to start actually. I'm terrible about keeping records, man. I know if I would keep records on just basic stuff with my snakes and the rodents, that it would increase I would have good data that I can use to increase things.
If I didn't put dates on the tubs, I would be a total disaster. So
yeah. Well, it's I've got one that I think is about 5 months old at this point.
okay.
And I'm starting to notice that difference in their coat, like where their coat just doesn't look the same as when they're younger. Their body structure is just not the same. And so I think I'm gonna like start doing kind of a 6-month cap on them. But there's 2 reasons for that though. Another thing that I experienced recently, and look, this is completely anecdotal because it was just well, it wasn't all from one kill off. There was a couple other ones, but I had let some colonies go for, well, they were animals that had since I first got this operation, which was in like May, I think, of last year.
Okay.
And these animals had basically stopped producing and had gotten really, really fat. And I had fed them off to, I don't know, it was several green tree pythons. And I had 5 chondros regurge these rats, 5 of them. Yeah. And chondros just are not a regurging snake. They just don't and all these animals are fine right now. In my experience, the very rare occasions that I've had chondros regurge, it's because they were about to fucking die. You know, something else was good. They had some kind of, something else was going on and they regurge and then roll. All these animals that regurge, they're all totally fine. But they all did it like deep into the digestion. It wasn't the next day. It was like several days later. I had 5 chondros out of like 9 or 10 that I fed. But these were like medium rat size, like just shitty looking, flabby rats. And it makes me wonder if it was just that the fat content that was just too much to digest for them. It's definitely not natural for these animals to, they're eating lean, healthy. Rodents don't have the lifespan in the wild to make it to be fat retired breeders. Something picks them off before they get to that point, And so whether that was the cause or not, and I can't see why not. Again, these animals are all healthy. There's nothing, they're all fine right now. So I just won't be doing that anymore. I'll just be turning them over well before. And plus, like I say, they just weren't producing, and that's why they got fat too. They're just sitting there eating at the same level that I was feeding them when they were producing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that definitely had me freaked out for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, going through that production process for a female is a natural weight regulator. If you want to use your retired breeders as feeders, which we all do, having those events taking place, I personally feel, and Marshall or Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to kind of help regulate that animal to be a healthier feeder once you retire it out. You guys have any thoughts on that?
What was the question again?
Essentially, like if like in Patrick's instance, where they're not producing well, these rats are kind of growing, they're eating,
right?
As opposed to a female who you retire earlier while she's still in that reproductive cycle, she doesn't have the opportunity to put on a bunch of extra weight. Would be retiring them sooner while they're still actively producing, going through that weight gain, weight loss, result in a healthier feeder than the instance that Patrick just laid out for us.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead. Mark.
No, go ahead.
Like there's like there's a big difference between the male and the female for one thing. The males tend, I mean, they seem to get a little bit obese too, but they seem to stay bigger and stronger.
Yeah, for sure.
Where the females, I mean, I agree. I think the younger moms that you use as a food item is probably better than the older one that's just been sitting around for a while. Not producing, not doing anything. Just getting lethargic.
I wish I had could tell you like what the sex of what the sex was of the ones that caused the regurges, because it may very well be that all the ones that
Might have been
regurged females.
Because
Yeah,
there's a lot more
yeah,
female retired breeders than there are males.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And to be fair on a couple of the animals, it was a very large meal, like a very large meal for those
Okay.
animals. And Stephen, I can't remember if this was you that told me this, but somebody recently told me that they thought that if you're comparing by just dimensions, that the ASF were maybe a little bit heavier, like a slightly denser prey item than something else similarly sized. I can't remember who told me that recently, but
And we may have been talking about that, comparing like birds to rodents, because that's something that
this was a rodents to rodents thing, because birds are definitely less dense. Birds and lizards are definitely less dense.
I've heard a lot of people say that the soft furs were kind of like what you're describing, you know, but I don't know if that's just like trying to convince people that that's a better prey item. That, you know, they say that you know, I think they're all good, you know, just depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I actually just, with like rats smell too much, and I just enjoy the soft furred rats more than the other type. I don't necessarily I like to think that they are a better prey item from a nutrition standpoint, but I don't have anything to really back that up at all. So, and apparently if you let them get too fat, they're just as bad as anything else.
You know, talking about the smell, you know, the rodents can get you in trouble too. I think I'm trying to remember the year. It was like 93 or 94. I got kicked out of St. Paul, Minnesota. Yeah, man, it was like, it really sucked, because I was just starting out. I had no money, and I was living in this house that, in fact, the house that it was, which is very ironic, was I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Carl Herman. He's the one that produced the first tiger retics. It was his old house, and I got asked to leave the house, you know, to move because of rodents.
Because the smell?
No. It's even funnier than that. I mean, it's a funny story, really, but I had rodents going in the garage, and I had just cleaned the roof gutters, and I left a bunch of shit in a 5-gallon bucket, and that one of the neighbors apparently complained, and the health inspector showed up at my door. I come up from the basement. He's got a badge on and all that, and he's like, "Yeah, well, we got these complaints, you know." And I go, and the complaint was, there, you know, people coming in and out, and there's this, you know, odd stuff in this 5-gallon bucket on the side of the house, you know, and so the health inspector comes through and checks everything out. He said, "Man, this, you know, is cleaner than most restaurants I go look at." And he goes, "Well, there's going to be other inspectors," and some inspector showed up, and as soon as she got out of the car on the road, she's like, "Oh my God, I can't stand this smell," you know. And that's what they ended up getting me on, was that they said it was a nauseous odor to the area or something like that. That was the ordinance that I was breaking. And the person that complained worked at the news station, so the city was not gonna deal with it at all. So I didn't have a leg to stand on. But that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because it got me out of the city, and you know, that's what really changed my life and my business. So you turn a negative into a positive.
That's right.
But rodents can, you know, that, like, you have to be a little bit careful with the smell if you got neighbors. Another friend of mine I knew years ago got in trouble because he was using the bedding out on the property, like around the flower beds, and that got him in trouble. I mean, they came in with like odor detectors and stuff, and they almost made him leave the place, because his house, because the smell of the rodents they were deeming was not safe to live in. So you had to be a little bit careful with this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I've always been real sensitive to it just because I live in a residential neighborhood. I've got neighbors, not so close at this place that I've moved to, but like for the first 10 years I did rodents, and I didn't do them at this scale before. I basically just did enough to feed my babies, and then I would get everything switched over, like all my holdbacks, I would get them switched over to frozen thawed. So really I was just feeding, we're having to raise enough rats to feed babies, and then the babies don't get as big, so you don't need as much space, and blah blah blah. But I was doing it in like a Rubbermaid building in my backyard that I'd like rigged an air conditioner up to, and rigged some, like put some insulation on the inside of it.
I always worried about stuff getting loose, out of the building.
So my dad, like we were talking about tornadoes earlier, he was like, "Man, if a tornado comes through there, you're gonna you're gonna infest the neighborhood or whatever."
Yeah, that was always a fear of mine. That's why I wouldn't leave home. Storm. There's a ginormous oak tree that fell in a storm, fell the other way of two of my buildings. It would have cut them in half.
Jeez.
This was a big ass oak tree, and I just had the other one taken out this last year, just because it was making me nervous. Get more storms, it seems. But yeah, you got to keep those rodents safe. And Bill Brandt and I used to talk about this all the time, that we thought that the rodents could be the biggest downfall of this industry. If we have people getting sick, or just don't have them,
Yeah.
If these cities start banning them, that like the African softers, like I thought when those came into the country, which people haven't been working with those that long. What if those get loose in some of the neighborhoods? I haven't heard of any of that, but
they're banned in California. Was that
they're banned here too?
Or really?
In Alabama, are they?
Yep.
I know Georgia, they're banned. It must be some southeastern states they're banned.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a pain. Well, we'll hit this comment real quick regarding colonies tending to crash after introducing new stock. Would that be through like viral or anything else? My understanding is it's typically a viral thing. I don't know if any of you guys want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Usually it's viral.
Yeah.
Yeah, and mycoplasmosis is very common in collection. It like that particular virus won't kill everything, but it'll kill a lot. And then, you can continue your colony, but it'll always be compromised. So that's a bad one.
Yeah.
There's other things that like they can, your rodents, if you don't have clean water, they can get giardia. Which is not that big a deal with feeding to the reptiles, but it could impact you.
Yeah.
External parasites can affect you. They'll bite you. They kind of suck. They get rodent mites.
Rat mites.
It's actually a neotropical mite.
Yeah, tropical rat mites.
Yeah, they're blood suckers. They won't affect your snakes, but those are always a pain in the ass.
And can't that some of these viruses be mitigated a bit by just keeping the animals on the young side, where you just kind of keep them strong before that virus kind of overtakes their system? Obviously, once the initial wave is passed.
Maybe. I know it just depends. It just depends on the colony. It depends on the virus. Viruses are always mutating. I know if mycoplasmosis, you probably want to start a new colony.
Okay.
It would be that compromising. You know, the crickets across the country had a virus. I don't know if you guys remember that. They still do, I'm sure, but it compromises their production. I don't know the numbers on that. Maybe 25%. I don't know the full details on that.
Yeah, man, it's scary stuff. It just, you know, emphasizes just how important that biosecurity is.
And I've heard of bird flu getting into some rats. I don't know about just wild rodents.
Okay.
I've heard of that. I haven't looked into that yet, so I probably shouldn't speak on that.
Okay.
I don't have any experience with that. I've never really introduced new blood or whatever. The only thing that I've ever had a crash on is air conditioner went out back at the old place, and I mean there was like nothing survived.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, I had like one rack at the time, so it wasn't like, you know, losing a huge thing, but I've never really had like a mass die off, and maybe it's because I've never brought anything new in. You know, like when I started them, I got the mice and the rats from the same person, and then who had been, you know, breeding those colonies in the same building, and then same thing when I had to start over again, and I've never had problems with. You know, a lot of people say that don't breed mice and rats in the same building, that, you know, this and that, but I don't know. I've never really had a big problem with it.
Okay. Then kind of emphasizing this. So Brandon wants to know how much the strain of the rodent comes into a factor. And I think it's you know, very important, like what we were talking about earlier, how a lot of like our mice and rats were strains that were originated in the laboratory system, got out, and then were kind of kept almost the same kind of way for, you know, decades. I think it's very important to do research on the strain you're getting when you're considering starting a rodent colony, you know, because hopefully you want to maintain that strain for years to come. And if you're starting off with this kind of like, you know, cheap kind of questionable strain from somebody who doesn't have documentation on it, then you're setting yourself up to be vulnerable to, you know, some sort of virus or pathogen going through that colony. So I think that's some of that can't be overstated. So the last topic I want to kind of touch on with you guys before we wrap up here, and I know we're kind of burning the midnight oil a little bit, is one that I think can be very practical for people, and hopefully one that can convince some people who are listening to change their minds and potentially give this a try. I want to talk about how much this saves for you as a reptile breeder. You know, how much money we'd be spending to feed our collection on, you know, even wholesale or retail rodents. I don't know if any of you guys have actual numbers or just kind of guesses on that, but I want to kind of put that out there just so people really can hear it and understand just how much of a difference this could make for them and their, you know, their whole reptile and rodent operations. So Marshall, do you have anything to start with on that?
Unfortunately, I don't have numbers because I've never, you know, ever since I've had this many snakes, it's I've been self-sufficient, so I don't know what I would be spending otherwise. I will say that I feed all of these snakes now for less money than when I fed probably a third as many or half as many buying frozen thawed. I mean, like, and like I said, right now I've scaled production back. Like I probably spent between racks and the building and everything maybe around 45 grand or something like that 4 years ago to build my rat building and buy, you know, all the equipment and everything, and I'm pretty sure it's paid for itself already in 4 years. Versus, you know, if I was buying rats for $6 a piece or whatever, I have no idea what people pay for them. Like I have one guy that I'll sell my surplus to, and like he shows up when he's supposed to show up, and he's on time and pays in cash, and it's like, man, to me, like I give him a deal. I think, I don't know. I mean, $2 a rat is for a small rat. I don't know.
You're not getting that online. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. Oh, I know that. Yeah. I don't know what the going rate is. I bet it varies a lot depending on where you are too, and having the right plug or whatever. Like knowing the right person.
Yeah. So like on your heaviest week of the year, how many rats or mice total are you feeding out of that shed? Like when everything's eating, peak baby season, feeding adults up, how many like rodents are you using on your heaviest week?
I mean, it's probably around. I mean, the collection varies from 175, 150 to 250, depending on the time of year. So 250 on weeks that I feed everything. 'Cause I feed babies every week. So, yeah.
I mean, if we're going off of retail prices, maybe averaging $2 a piece across the board, that adds up really, really, really quickly. And when you reduce that cost down to, not almost zero, but
right. Or a positive. Yeah. Even with the small amount that I do sell, it for sure pays for the bedding and the food.
I think especially for anyone who's trying to do this on some sort of professional level, I don't see how anyone could do it without breeding their own rodents personally, especially in today's day and age. Mark, I want to throw this one to you now. What do you have to say about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, not to get into numbers, but yeah, I couldn't do what I do without having a rodent. But so I don't have the numbers of reptiles that I used to, but it was well in the over 1,000 animals to feed, weekly,
right?
And babies. Now I've got 250 snakes, excluding hatchlings. Yeah, and that's still substantial, So
for sure.
I mean, what I do with the rodents is Jill is on the payroll, so that it's kind of a tax benefit.
Sure.
And, that she pays. The rodents pay for her, pay for the feed, and feed the snakes. So that's kind of how I figure it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Kyle, how about you?
I probably only spend about $20 a month on feeding them. And at any given time, I mean, I don't know. I don't feed my stuff all at once, nor do I feed them on any kind of a regular basis. So I guess maybe every month I might go through, 40 hoppers and 20 fuzzies or so.
Yeah. But then come baby season, though, that's when that is really, really, really important. And the price of retail pinkies is not what it used to be. I mean, shit, some places charge almost $1 a piece for pinkies. So
for pinkies, really?
For pinkies.
Yeah, and I mean, baby season, I probably go through. Yeah, I feed once every about 7 to 10 days when they're babies, and at any given time when it's baby season, I've got 200 babies on the ground, plus a collection of 280 to 300 snakes. So
I mean that.
I remember they were like 17 cents a piece or something like that back when I was buying them the last time.
In the good old days, they sure fucking were. Well, not anymore.
I used to pay 16 cents from Big Cheese.
Do you know? Patrick and Kyle? Do y'all know Ray Queen?
So it's funny that you asked that, and that you said you got him from the Mouse Factory.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Ray Queen.
Ray's an old buddy of mine.
Okay, so
he's a big rattlesnake guy.
Yeah, some of my stock actually came from animals that he owned. Some of my Mexican subspecies, but a good friend of mine managed that place for him. His name was Justin, and that's who I got my line of mice from. And then I introduced another line shortly after that, so I've kind of made my own. But a lot of my originating mice come from that Ray Queen Mouse Factory.
Yeah, Ray was good. I learned a lot from Ray.
Yeah,
he's I think I'd have to say he was the best mouse producer I ever knew.
Yeah, for sure.
The rodents used to come so clean.
Yeah.
They would come so clean from him.
Like the first one to what do you call
vacuum seal them?
Vacuum seal the pinkies.
Yeah,
he vacuum sealed them and then put them on those styrofoam plates.
Trays. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Plus, he was just a cool dude, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were all
That's
just
awesome.
like so clean, man. Like no shavings, no poop on, you know. Like I mean, just
Yeah.
like the rats had just had a bath before they got packed up.
Yeah.
The tails were clean. You know, you
I
get
don't
them
think
from other.
you don't see that now, you know.
No,
Yeah.
No, you don't get that kind of quality anymore. That's long gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Big
Yeah, 'cause
cheese
I think
used to be
Marshall,
like
I think
that, but
I
they're
think
not anymore.
you probably paid like 15 cents a piece for those too, didn't you?
Yep.
The mites?
Yeah. Yeah, from Mouse Factory.
They were
Pinkies.
given to me.
Yeah. No, I was talking about the pinky mice that Marshall got from the
Okay.
Mouse Factory. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, times have definitely changed, man. Everything like that, all the supplies, your feeders, man, it's crazy. Even compared to 10 years ago, it's probably doubled since then. So, I mean, it really can price you out of the marketplace if you don't try to find ways around it, like what we've been talking about all night. So,
yeah.
no, it's really amazing. Patrick, on the same topic of, you know, how much this decreases your expense, what are we looking at?
So to be fair, I still don't have this thing dialed in. I think with the space that I you know, I can't expand beyond the space that I have them in, but I think I will over the next few months see a pretty significant increase in the production with turning over breeders faster and doing 1.6 instead of 1.4. But right off the bat, I mean, immediately after I got the operation rolling, you know, I was saving, and I have more snakes now than I did then, but I was spending 600 or 700 a month on feeders, and that's it. I mean, you know what my pricing tier is with my supplier. Like I get really really good prices, and I was spending 600 or 700 a month, and that dropped down to 400 or 500 a month immediately. So just right off the bat, I was saving 200 or 300. Now the cost of the food is almost negligible because most of the stuff is like I say, scraps from stuff that I'm buying or something. You know, that black seed is really cheap. It takes forever to go through a bag of Missouri. You know, buy a 40-pound bag of Missouri. It lasts for months. And like the most expensive part of maintaining my rats is having Zach do it because I'm paying him to work for me. So like, other than that, the costs are just they almost just disappear across that. And I feel like once I get the production up a little bit from where I was at, that it'll be saving me even more than that. And I would like to achieve the goal that I was aiming at, which was just to feed my chondro collection with it. Now I've got I think I have about 400 snakes right now, and maybe a couple of dozen of those are animals that will be going out soon. Some babies, just some leftover babies from last year, maybe 3 dozen animals that are going to go out.
Okay.
You know, so it's and you know, when baby season, I'm finally starting to have eggs on the ground. So over the next few months, those numbers are going to go way up. Way up. But you know, I don't ever, with the number of snakes that I don't have plans currently to be breeding enough rodents to feed my whole collection. But as simply for an experiment, I would like to feed all of my chondros ASF that I produce, and I'm confident that it will increase the productivity of my females, and just I think I'll have healthier chondros because of it. And that in and of itself, like one extra baby chondro in the year, like kind of like offsets any like cost or anything for maintaining these rodents, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Hell yeah. I guess I'll throw mine out too. So like at the scale I'm running, I'm probably either feeding fresh or freezing about 125 to 150 rodents a week. And then, you know, that'll definitely pick up come summertime. But like I'm not doing rats, so I have to buy essentially small rats and up, and comes out to about like $1,000 quarterly. I have to drop on those, but which kind of sucks. But like, if I had to buy all the mice and stuff, I don't think I could do this at all. You know, especially like on a full-time basis, that would not be possible for me. One last good comment to go on here. At what point would you guys suggest breeding your own rodents as far as the total number of snakes? Marshall, what would you say to that?
Man, like, I don't know. It's so easy if you only had, I mean, the thing is you got to have the right spot for it, you know?
Depends on the kind of
It's all
snake you have.
about having a spot.
If you have 25
Yeah, it depends.
mainland retics, then
Yeah,
you know,
it's not going to, yeah,
but,
right, exactly. But I mean, if you just have like, I mean, even if you had, say, I don't know, 20 snakes,
yeah,
I mean, you could have like literally one, depending on what kind of snake you could have, you know, for chondros, 20 adult chondros, you could probably like run like 2 or 3 trays, and have enough to feed them, you know, which would take you like 15 minutes a week to clean them and feed them and do whatever you needed to do to them. But you know, again, it's the having the spot. You don't really want to do it, you know, inside your bedroom closet because
Like your kitchen?
you're gonna smell it. Yeah, or your kitchen.
yeah. Kyle, what do you think about that? Do you have another perspective?
You said what, Stephen?
Oh, what are your thoughts on that? What would your perspective be on total number of snakes, and maybe even with the stuff you're working on? Like if you had a Montane collection, at what point would you be like, you know, hey, you should start breeding your own rodents to feed what you got?
I mean, yeah, I would say around the same. I mean, even if you had 20 snakes, it would benefit you to breed a pan of your own rodents. But definitely makes more of a difference the more snakes you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark?
Yeah.
I'd have to say pretty much the same thing, you know, and, you know, having that right spot is critical. You don't want to let stuff get out or in. So,
yeah,
you know, or
sure.
smell up your house. You
Right.
know, people end up getting divorced over rodents, I think.
Wouldn't surprise me. Patrick, you have anything else to add to that?
I'm going to kind of say the same thing, especially about having the space. So like you know how I'm set up over here. My rodent room is in a laundry room closet in the snake house. I wouldn't do it over here on my side. Like it's because I had that space available with an exhaust fan. But you know, as far as the numbers, if you have a small space like that, same thing, man. If I 20, 30 snakes that you could feed for free off of like a 10-gallon aquarium, depending on what species you've got, you know, you get a one little colony of mice and feed your stuff, you know.
Yeah, and I think this comment says it all. This kind of goes back to something Eugene Bissett said on the most recent podcast he did with MJ. I think it was with
yeah, he did say that.
He's like, get your rodents first. Have your food ready before you get your snakes, and that's not practical for everybody. If you're on Eugene Bissett's level, you have no choice.
Yeah.
But I think that was definitely some sage wisdom from Mr. Bissett on that episode. Well, guys, we're over 2.5 hours. You guys got to be getting pretty tired. I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. This was possibly my favorite podcast I've ever done, so I'm absolutely thrilled we were able to do this.
Right on.
I want to go around one more time. Just any parting wisdom, advice, encouragement for anyone out there who heard this conversation is now encouraged to do this. Marshall, I'll start with you and go around the loop.
Just, you know, do your research, try to make the job, do your setup to make it as easy and quick as possible, because you don't want it to be a drag on you, you know. And just, you know, again, I can't stress enough having the right space, you know, and having like, you know, a nice rodent rack, and not using the little lab thing. I mean, anything you can do to make your life easier when you're doing them. That would be my advice, you know.
Okay. Hell yeah. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, rodents suck. I can't stand them. I'd never raise rodents." I think, we if you're going to raise snakes, you need to learn to like rodents. You need to learn to love them.
Yeah.
And they're actually pretty cool. So you can do that and then find that right spot to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Start out easy, and you'll learn how to do it.
And that's the thing.
Yeah,
you don't need to dive into the deep end with this. You can start in the very, very shallow end and get yourself used to it and find a level where you're comfortable. That's the thing. You don't need to have even the shed Marshall size. That's completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
I started with aquariums.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Kyle, how about you?
No, nothing to add to any of that.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Patrick?
Yeah, Marshall kind of nailed it with most of what I have to say about that. But you guys know that I'm pretty particular about what I feed myself, and which partly allows me to like indulge however I want when the occasion arises, right? But like my tap water isn't suitable for me to drink here, so I don't give it to my animals either, right? Like I buy the water that I give to my snakes here, and so when I'm thinking along those, like if I'm trying to apply that principle across the board, like there's something to be said for the quality of the food that I'm giving my snakes and the quality of the food that I'm giving the feeders that I'm raising for my snakes, and so that's something to be said for like a reason to get started doing it. But just like what Marshall said, it's you want to get your setup in a way that you will. I'm not saying you have to enjoy doing it, but man, it's a lot better if you do enjoy it. But it definitely shouldn't be like a big chore for you, because, and this applies to all animal care across the board, your snakes, your feeder rodents, your dog, everything across the board. You can't do the square peg and round hole thing. You have to have your setup. You have to have your things set up in a way that it's convenient and works for you. Because if it doesn't work for you, it does not work for them. I don't care what kind of like discipline or you think you have or whatever. You got to get it set up where it's easy and it works well for you, and preferably that you actually enjoy it the way I enjoy keeping the soft fur grass.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I think, the thing that I would add is it really can be fun. Like doing rodents on a small scale can be truly an enjoyable thing. I mean, we're all animal lovers. I hope everyone who keeps reptiles is an overall animal lover. Rodents are no different. I mean, they might be dirtier than your reptiles or have more of a smell or whatever, but it really is fun. And if you take a lot of what we said tonight and, apply it to what you're doing to make things easier, cleaner, there's a lot of joy to be derived from it. It's a breeding project that works and happens quickly. If you don't want to wait, you're waiting months and months for your reptiles to be given birth. These things are doing it all the time. It's a breeding project that actually works. And, if you're like me, I love making systems, following them, being kind of scientific about it. And you can, the rodents give you an opportunity to do that and, have fun at the same time. So,
and to pick out pretty colors with the ASF.
Exactly. Or if you have fancy mice, you can do the same thing. Any of you guys have anything to add before we wrap here?
Yeah, I do. I think maybe at some point we could get this same lineup on here and talk about snakes.
That might be a good idea. Yeah. Go almost 3 hours and barely talk about snakes at all. Yep. But I think that'd be awesome. Well, Marshall, I'll start with you. Where can people find you, follow what you're doing, see available animals? How can people get a hold of you?
Red Mountain Herp on Instagram. Is probably the best place, and there's a link there to my MORPH market, which has got available animals. Pretty much everything I've got is between both of those platforms.
All right, awesome. How about you, Mark? I know you do your best to do as little of this stuff as possible, but if anyone wants to see your availability, how can they find that?
MORPH market.
Okay,
that's all I do. So,
all right. Awesome. All right, Kyle, how about you?
I don't really post anywhere, maybe fauna classifieds here and there, but it's generally word of mouth and repeat customers that buy my stuff every year. But my Instagram is Clob King. I post, I travel all over the world and photograph snakes from all over. So I post all those photos on Instagram.
Hell yeah. All right, Patrick.
I am arboreal_obsession on Instagram and on Facebook, although I admittedly don't update that Facebook very often. I'm also gtpatrick.tx on Instagram, and you could shoot me a friend request on Facebook, but man, you'll just likely sit in the purgatory that has over 1,000 people in it right now. So Instagram's probably better.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll run through mine real quick. So Scrub Shepherd Instagram, Stephen Kush Facebook, Stephen Kush on YouTube as well, Kush Reptile Morph Market, and then I'm here every Wednesday. But hey, thank you guys once again for doing it. Thank you everyone who tuned in with us tonight for this amazing conversation. Catch you all back here next week for a new episode.